The book of nature is now followed by the book of our country. There is a difficulty partly in the subject's proper limitation, partly in the right border separation of a reading book which amuses, and a study book which perfectly presents the announced subject. It is possible that not even this final form has met the right measure or the right manner. There are unsteady things, and the historical section resembles a study book without foreshadowing its detailed presentation. Of this let the experience give its judgment. Let the power of Lord God, that alone influences in us all good, bless also this imperfect work, that it would benefit his kingdom and would plant in many young hearts love for the fatherland. Chapter 7. The country and the people. Now I understand it. This country is my fatherland. All its sons and daughters are one nation. They have the same Christianity, same teaching, same rights, same duties, same benefit, same harm, same freedom, same love, and same hope. In a few foreign countries there is much discord. Nations of different families and different languages live beside each other, but they cannot agree. In other foreign countries the nations have better understood their own joy. During the passage of time they have learned to respect and love each other, to share their goodness, and to grant the similar benefits to each other. Thus they have together grown strong and have formed themselves into one nation, whose benefit has no stranger dared to violate. God's wise will is that the nations must constantly learn something from one another. The human family is similar to a mighty old birch. The leaf are you and your small home. The branch is your nation. The frame or stem is the humanity. Chapter 8. Our country and the world. I know that our country is only a small part of the globe's surface. Now I know that Finland is in the northern part of the continent, which is called Europe, and by the sea which is called the Baltic Sea. I know also that as our nearest neighboring states are in the north, Norway, in the west, Sweden, in the south, Estonia, in the east, Russia. The God-ordained wise order is that the countries and nations need each other, because if each person, him or herself, had enough, no one would seek others, but he or she would live and work only for him or herself. But now the people must learn to know and help each other so that all would love each other as brothers. Chapter 37. Finland's climate. The people of southern countries have said that there are 9 months of winter in Finland and not 3 months of decent summer. Sometimes occur such cold years when this mocking talk is fulfilled, but in the regular years we have in the midsummer almost as warm weather as there is on the seashores in Central Europe. Other years are mild, and one can say that in Finland during the normal years there are 5 or 6 months of winter. Chapter 48. The forest. Wherever in Finland you travel, you see on the horizon lakes, hills, or forests. The surrounding landscape is like a portrait. The forest is like its frame, and behind the trees' tops starts the sky. All our forests are mostly pine forests, spruce forests, and birch forests. No country needs its forest better than Finland, but the Finnish people treat their forest light-heartedly. The lust for profit entices many people to sell or to fell too precisely their forest, instead of cutting annually only the trees that must be felled to treat the forest correctly, and that he would receive from his forest a lasting benefit. Chapter 54. The frosty night. Night frosts occur sometimes when the fields are in their full growth. in May, June, July, and they can then cause more or less damage. But the most dangerous ones are the frosts which occur when the grains are formed into seeds. With the sufficient digging of trenches with an expedient care for the plants, and the cultivation of fittingly early plant species and refined plants, can the frost's damages be prevented, or at least reduced. But neither he who sows nor he who waters is anything, only God gives the growth. Chapter 58. The Finnish horse. In addition to endurance, is the horse's, like the nation's characteristic, a notable stubbornness. It obeys an experienced rider, but it deals at times like it wants with an inexperienced one. The second part, the nation. Chapter 61 of Matthias Alexanteri Castrén. In the Tervala chapel, which is far in the north, on the Kemi River's shore, was born in 1813 a boy called Matthias Alexanteri Castrén. After completing the school, he graduated, and at last, having studied at the university, he became a doctor of philosophy. He knew the many languages, but he wanted to examine especially the languages which were related to Finnish. Therefore he went forth to long journeys, first to Lapland, then to Russia. He traveled on the Arctic Sea's coasts, through the wildernesses of central Russia and Siberia to the Far East, up to China's borders. In these journeys he had to suffer much. His life was often in danger. From his heart flowed love and practice towards the humanity's forgotten people. At last he became the first professor of the Finnish language at the Finnish University. He died soon after that in 1852. Chapter 62. Finland's kindred peoples. From a common first home which has perhaps been located in Russia near the Volga River's curve, have the Finnic peoples left, and they have thus been scattered in a wide area. Furthest away in the northeast live the Ostyaks and the Voguls, in the north the Lapps. More in the west live the Zyrians and Votyaks. To the south of them live the Cheremises and Mordvins. Of the Finnic people tribe is also the nation who personally calls itself Magyars, but whom we called Hungarians. In the Gulf of Finland area live then our close kindred tribes. The Livonians in the Cape tip of Courland, the Estonians in Estonia, the Ingrians and Votyans until the most recent times in Ingria, the Vepsians to the south of the isthmus between Lake Onega and Lake Ladoga, and Karelians in eastern Karelia and more to the south in the former Tver and Novgorod provinces. Chapter 74. Finland's people. This is the Finnish people's map. In our country's eastern parts in Karelia and Savonia live Karelians and Savonians. In our country's western part, in Tavastia Satakunta, Finland proper, in Uusimaa's northern part, and in Ostrobothnia's southern part live Tavastians. In Ostrobothnia live Ostrobothnians, and in Lapland's part, which belongs to Finland, live Lapps. In Uusimaa's southern part, on southern Ostrobothnia's coast, and in the Åland archipelago live Swedish-speaking people. To southern Finland have moved a small number of Estonians, Danes, and some few people belonging to other nationalities. It must be a nation in which there is a profound and true fear of God. It must be a diligent and enduring nation. It must be a hardened and strong nation. It must be a patient nation, ready for abstinence, and a vital nation. It must be a valiant and war-fit nation. It must be an extremely tenacious and stubborn nation. It must be a freedom-loving nation. It must be a knowledge-desiring and learning-loving nation. Chapter 75. Matti. A master had 3 servants. Ivan was a Russian, Erik was a Swede, and Matti was a Finn. On a few summer mornings, the master sent his servants to plough a stony hill into a field, and showed a section of the hill to each one. Ivan ploughed while singing happily and completed his section by noon. Erik ploughed at times while laughing, at times while grumbling, and completed his section by the afternoon. Matti looked grim. He first thought for a while, and completed his section only by the late evening. When they had ended their work, the master came to look at it. Ivan has worked most swiftly, he said, but Ivan has left the stones in their places. Erik has cleared away the small stones, but he has left the big ones in their places. Matti has cleared away the big stones, but he has left the small ones in the ground. Each of you has his merits and his faults. Next time I will order Ivan to harrow the field, Erik to dig ditches in the meadow, and Matti to wrench or twist stones, for that he is created. Matti is grim-minded and shy, but when he has sat for some time in the company of good friends, he seems to become milder and, as it were, to go forth from his nest. His angry countenance melts away. He may become happy, even witty in his way. Matti is a thoroughly honest man. It is Matti's habit to ponder for a long time and then to hasten. Always Matti needs time to think. He doubts everything new, but he can get used to it gradually. Matti loves his horse, his field, his boat, his sauna, his workshop, and his old accurate bullet gun. It would do no harm if Matti calculated better his income and his expenses, because saving for tomorrow is not among his habits. Otherwise, Matti is helpful, hospitable, reliable, and faithful. He lies around in the winter, he stays awake in the summer. He likes listening to instrument music. He makes up beautiful songs, and he becomes pleased with all where thinking is needed. He is skilled at guessing riddles and at inventing intelligent proverbs. Chapter 87. The Karelians. He is sensitive-minded. He easily becomes sad and easily becomes glad. He loves joking and beautiful songs, which his own master poets compose. That is why in his land have been found the most beautiful songs, which he has recorded in his memory from the forefathers' time. The Karelian is like the Finnish people's dayside, candid, sociable, vivid, and light-hearted, easily guided and easily misled, gullible like a child, yet not without Finn's stubbornness, but well-learned and equipped with natural gifts, which only need a good upbringing to set him among the most able people of his nation. Chapter 88. The Savonians. The Savonian is more understanding and pursues his own interest more than the Karelian of goodwill. His commerce usually succeeds better, and he laughs at his neighbors who today eat more than they earned yesterday. The Savonians' horses are our country's best runners. From their cows they get so much butter that they send it many thousands of kilograms per year to the other countries. Chapter 90. The Tavastians. What steady, quiet, and rough things are in our nation are inherited from the Tavastians. The Tavastian is also more seldom speaking and more steady-minded than the Karelian. Far-thinking and stubborn, slow to get angry and slow to forgive. In his stubborn character there is much faithfulness. It must be added, however, that this pure old Tavastian character is found any more only in a few interior and northern parts of Tavastia. Chapter 92. Finland's Swedish population. These coastal dwellers are a population who has originally come from Sweden and who speaks their Swedish language. But since they have already moved here in distant ancient times, and thus they have lived for many centuries beside Finland's other inhabitants, because they love our country and confess it as their fatherland, and they do not at all want to separate from it. They have already grown attached to the Finnish people, and they are in this sense Finns like we all. Finland's Swedish population lives in 3 separate regions: in Åland and its archipelago, in southern Uusimaa, and in southern Ostrobothnia. These coastal regions are densely populated and well cultivated. Their Swedish population is more mobile, more restless, more unsteady than the Finnish population, swifter in their decisions and quicker in their activities. Chapter 94. The archipelago dwellers of southwestern Finland. On Åland's thousands of islands and eyots, and in a part of the archipelago to the south of Turku, live a part of the Swedish population as sailors and fishermen. They grow a little grain and potatoes, they have horses and cattle, they burn chalk and brick, they ship trees to foreign countries, but their actual field and meadow is the sea. The Finnish character's calmness makes them patient and carefree about their waste of time. Chapter 95. The Uusimaa people. The Uusimaa Swede is affluent, joyful, understanding, talkative, and comfort-loving. In the spring, in March or April, the coastal dweller leaves here, like elsewhere, for a seal hunt on the ice. The Uusimaa person loves funny fairy tales. The Uusimaa dweller has also many songs, old and new ones, sad and happy ones. Chapter 96. The Ostrobothnians. Ostrobothnia's Swedes have in our country both a good and a bad reputation. As skilled workers, they are seen everywhere in the cities and in the gentry houses. They build ships and boats, houses and factories better than the others, but at times awakens and emerges in them that old inherited war zeal. After drinking too much, they soon start fighting. Chapter 97. The pagan Finns' gods. Near the end of pagan time, the farming Finns' most important god was Ukko. They assumed that he ruled over the course of clouds, thunder, snow, hail, and rain. The ruler of airs was Ilmarinen. The king of forest was the old grey-bearded Tapio. Only the spirit of a human being was free. Chapter 98. The Kalevala Elias Lönnrot. Dr. Elias Lönnrot undertook to walk around those regions of Karelia where the grey-headed wise people still sang poems. The Kalevala was published for the first time in 1835 and for the second time in 1849. Chapter 116. The Finns in the time of paganism. The Finns came from the Gulf of Finland's southern shore, but not at one time but gradually during many centuries. The first families moved here about 100 years after the birth of Christ. At least some Finnish men were kings in their families. They loved freedom and did not know of another law or king. Chapter 117. The Swedes. There were at first 2 tribes of Swedes, the Götas or Geats and Sveas or Sveans, who then united. Before they converted to the Christian doctrine, they worshipped forces of nature that they in their minds described as human-formed gods. The Swedes were originally subjects to several petty kings, but later all provinces recognized the suzerainty or sovereignty of Uppsala's king. They made wide-ranging Viking journeys and landed on the Baltic Sea's coasts wherever troubled the local peoples, forced them to pay tax, and robbed everything that they could take along to their ships. Chapter 118. The start of Russia's realm. The Russians were a great Slavic ethnic group, and they moved 1,000 years ago to their current country. Then lived Finnic tribes in a large part of the current Russia. The Swedish Rurik founded the Russian realm in 862 after the birth of Christ. In 988, Grand Duke Vladimir was baptized, and then the Russian people received the Christian doctrine, and they were connected to Constantinople's Greek church. A mighty Tatar nation, who were called Mongols, invaded Russia and kept the Russians in a harsh slavery for 250 years. Even Novgorod had to pay taxes to the Mongols, but it was distant, it retained its freedom better, and it was the mightiest Russian realm. It was also Finland's nearest neighbor, and it often entered war against Sweden because both countries wanted to conquer Finland. Chapter 119. The Saint King Eric. It has been estimated that the first crusade to our country was made in 1155 after our Saviour's birth. It is thought that King Eric and his troops landed somewhere on the coast between the present Turku and Pori. Both armies met each other and started to fight. It is said that many men were killed on both sides. At last, however, the Swedish host, which was better organized, claimed victory. The pagan Finns were totally defeated and scattered. Many of them were baptized by Bishop Henry, who had arrived with the king. The articles of faith were read aloud, and the interpreter translated them to the pagans' language. When they had then accepted the doctrines and replied, Amen, they were clothed with white robes. The priest blessed them, making a cross mark, and poured some water from a fountain on them. Many of these baptized people understood only a little, if at all, this new doctrine. But truly it was strange the day when Bishop Henry baptized these Finns. The Christian doctrine was brought to our country with violence, and violence can never build a permanent work. But violence was followed by love. Its work remained permanent, and that is why the later people have with justification blessed Bishop Henry's work. Chapter 120. Bishop Henry. While leaving Finland, the King Eric had left Henry here as the Finns' bishop. Henry was English and one of those apostles to the pagans who considered their own lives and luck cheap if they could just win souls for Christ. He moved courageously and without fear to distant towns, riding a horse in the summer, riding on a sleigh in the winter. When Bishop Henry had for some time fearlessly preached the Christian doctrine, he lost his life while spreading God's kingdom to the midst of the pagans. A pagan man called Lalli hated the bishop. Lalli was not at home when the bishop came to his manor. The bishop asked his wife Kerttu to give him some food. When she refused to give him food, the bishop ordered his servants to take what they needed, but he paid for all that they had taken and traveled forward. Lalli with his farmhands came home from the forest, and Kerttu complained of the bishop's and his servants' behavior. At once Lalli saddled his horse, pursued the bishop, met him about 8 kilometers away from Lalli's home on the ice of Lake Köyliö, and struck him dead with an axe. The Finnish people worshipped for a long time Saint Henry, so he would pray for all our country's sick, all distressed people, all unhappy people, and all sad people.